Would you? Ba-da-da-da. Hey, Utes.
Walk on your toes, bro. Walk on your toes.
Can't say I've ever been peer pressured into peach cobbler. I've been me pressured into peach cobbler. Yeah. Oh, we ready to go? Alrighty, Roo. Alright, let's get started. If you're keeping track at home, we are going to be in Genesis chapter 39. Genesis chapter 39. But before we get there, we need to do a little bit of review work, make sure we're all caught up before we dive right in. So, we are working with our main man, Joe, and Joseph. We are trying to look at him in a different light, maybe perhaps different than Bible class and flannel graphs Joseph, but instead as a real human person. And so we are looking at Joe, and we are seeing some things that are popping out at us. What is popping out to you about our main man, Joe, that maybe we don't talk about enough? All right, so very first thing we got is he's kind of self-centered. What makes you say that?
Just his whole, first thing that you hear is the story of him just tattling on the concubines' kids.
Okay, yes. So we've got the very first thing we learn about Joseph, and once again, we're talking about Jacob's legacy, and it starts with a tale about Joseph tattling on who? The concubine kids. We talked about that in Early Bird, that would kind of sounds like a dance troupe. The concubine kids. And so he tattles on them. Why does he think he can get away with it? Because they are of a lower class strata than him. What do we learn also? How old is Joe at the beginning of the story? 17 years old. He's not allowed to vote. So he's a little bit of a youngster going into it, but we already have a lot of some of his personality quirks that are going to come into play in later stories. What else do we know about Joseph?
Not very self-aware.
Not very self-aware. Yes, yeah. So what makes you say that?
And just saying, I just had this dream that I'm better than all of you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, yeah. So the very next story we find, well, I would say we have one story in between there, but the third story we find out about Joe is that he has a dream, and he is no Martin Luther King, I'll tell you that, because he tells it in exactly the wrong way. He tells both his brothers, whom already don't really like him, and then he tells his parents and his brothers again, hey, by the way, I've had a couple of dreams, and I just want you guys to know that I am better than you. Yes, What's in the middle there? What happens between tattletale and dreams? Yes, yeah, okay, so we got this very pretty coat. It is the coat of many colors, but what does it really represent?
It's a palm coat.
Yes, it's a palm coat. The coat goes all the way down to his palms, which means that little baby Joe does not have to do hard labor. He is not a laborer. Unlike his brothers, who were probably given a garment without sleeves so that they could do hard manual labor, he is given one with sleeves to signify that he doesn't have to work. More to the point, he is a favored son. He is the favorite. Why is that weird? Because he is the baby, probably. We don't know when Benjamin comes onto the scene, but it is very odd that he is the baby of the family and is also the favored. We talked a little bit about an Early Bird, and I thought it was kind of funny. Someone brought up, well, isn't that kind of what you would expect of a family with, like, the baby of the family? And in Western culture, absolutely. If you are the baby of the family, you are the favorite, as we talked about. I have an older brother, so that makes me the baby. But not only that, as I was very, very close with my cousins, when we were younger, and I am also the baby of all of my extended family. So obviously, I am just missing the coat. So yes, I'm also the smallest, only the one with red hair, and the cutest of all of them. So yes, in Western society, we would think absolutely the baby tends to be the favorite. That would not be the case in Eastern society. It would almost certainly be the oldest, because the oldest would be the source of strength for the family. They would probably be what we would call maybe babied, just because if the oldest lost some of their strength, even if it doesn't have to be death, but perhaps, if, for instance, the oldest loses a hand or something, well, now the patriarch of the family, or the future patriarch of the family, has now a pretty debilitating disability in this time. And so they would be babied, not the baby. But this is why we kind of have some dysfunction in this family. He's given a coat of many colors. He's given these dreams that he tells at exactly the wrong way and exactly the wrong time. Then what happens to him? Hey, guys. Talking about Joseph. Exactly. What happens to Joseph after he tells the dreams? Okay, yes. So first, he's told, why don't you go look for your brothers by dad? He goes, and he's on the wrong path, and who points him the right direction? The nameless man. That's for you to wrestle with and figure out who that might be. But since I said wrestling, I think we all know who it is. But so nameless man says they're that way. What's the first plan of the brothers? Kill him! All right, yes, yeah, let's kill him. All right, what's the second plan? There's one before that, actually. What's the second plan? Throw him down a well. Yes, yeah. So first plan is murder in cold blood. Who comes up with plan B? Ruby. Reuben comes up and says, let's throw him down the well. Why? Why does Reuben want to throw him down a well instead? Because he wants to come back and save him. Okay, so Reuben is acting like the firstborn. He says, hey, everybody, let's throw him down a well and leave him to die there, knowing that he's going to come back and try and save him. Once again, we see this deception and manipulation in this family. It keeps recurring over and over again. So Reuben tries to manipulate his brothers. Then Reuben leaves for reasons that we don't know. It probably has something to do with him being a little bit of an outcast in his family at this point because he slept with his father's concubines, but that's a whole other thing. However, when we find them, who comes up with plan C? Who comes up with the third plan? Judah. What's the third plan? Money. Let's sell him, okay? Let's sell our baby brother. Let's turn a profit on this dude. And who do they sell him to? Pick your favorite, Ishmaelites or Midianites. We don't really know. The text is very unclear for reasons beyond our understanding. The only thing we do know and maybe can parse out is that the Midianites and the Ishmaelites were probably very, very close cousins at this point. We kind of learned that if you buy that Keturah was actually a rebranded Hagar, then their ancestors would have been full-blooded brothers. And so they would be like full-blooded cousins. So if you buy that, maybe that's why they're a little bit interchangeable, but no one really knows for sure. So then, where does Joseph go? Potiphar's house, and he is in Egypt. Okay, yes, yeah. And then we go straight into Potiphar's house, right? No! Okay, we have this really, really weird side story. Give me the Cliff Notes version of the Judah and Tamar debacle.
Judah's got an oldest son.
Okay, yeah, hit me.
Judah's got an oldest son. Tamar is his wife. He dies. Tamar goes to next son. Next son's like, well, these kids aren't going to be mine because they're going to go to contribute, being his older brothers.
Yep.
So he says, nah, bro, and does what he shouldn't do.
Uh-huh.
And then God kills him for it.
Sure.
And then Judah's like, yeah, you're about to kill my next son, so bye-bye, send you back home. But I promise you'll have my other son when he's ready. He lied. And then he's traveling, just doing his merry little thing. And she hears about it, dresses up as a prostitute.
Yeah. Well, his wife died. Judah's wife dies. Yes. So I like to say he was looking for comfort in the arms of a woman of the night. Okay, go.
So, a man you should look up to.
Yes, yeah, obviously. Messiah material.
Yes. And so then he goes, oh, okay, she's pretty. And so he's like, oh, I'll send you a really nice goat for this. And she says, nah, give you a signet ring and your staff. Because she's playing the big brain.
And
your cloak.
Yep.
And so then he dips out, has a good time. She gets pregnant from it. And then about 3 months later, they're like, she's being a harlot, she's pregnant, kill her. And he's out here like, yes, let me get rid of this curse on my family. And then brings her to, and he's like, ha ha ha. And then she goes, oh, just tell me who this is, and it'll be all good.
Yeah.
And then he actually admitted his wrong. First patriarch to do so in all of Genesis.
Yes, yeah, okay. I loved the voices too. I think we should just call on you the whole time. Yes, yeah, so Nathan is exactly right. So Judah does a very horrible thing and sleeps with who is supposed to be his daughter-in-law. She gets pregnant, but before they could cast her out as a harlot, she says, what is the exact language? Anyone remember? Please identify. Yes, that's right. So she says, please identify these garments. Anyone for extra points remember when's the last time we heard that phrase? When Judah asks Jacob, identify this, please. So Judah is getting a taste of his own medicine, but as Nathan pointed out, for the first time in the entirety of the Bible so far, we have a patriarch take the blame for what he's done, own it, and actually call another person more righteous. In fact, what would have been considered a pagan woman as more righteous than he. So we kind of have this big revelation here. We figure out now why Judah might be the line in which kings would be derived, and eventually the Messiah himself, Jesus, because he owns up to his mistakes. He owns it and moves on, and we're going to see in Genesis chapter 44 that he actually makes a turnaround. That's the good stuff. That's what God likes to see. However, now we move on to chapter 39, and we have a very, very similar story. As I read it, I want you guys to try and pick out the parallels that you see from Judah and Tamar and this next story. Verse 1, now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. I think we mentioned this last week, but just to reiterate, it is described that Potiphar is an officer. Anyone else have a different word? Officer, maybe captain. Anyone have a captain? So why there's a little bit of discrepancy in that word is because in the Hebrew, that word is actually translated castrated. So that means that Potiphar was almost certainly a eunuch, which maybe informs, and maybe you have a little bit more sympathy for Potiphar's wife. Okay, so just adding that in there. Obviously, if you're not familiar with kind of ancient world politics here, first of all, if he was already married, that usually means that he was castrated or made a eunuch after he was married. So he was not, a young boy when this happened. It was probably a pretty huge ordeal. But second, in ancient world, whenever especially officials were in charge of like money or things like that, or very, very trusted positions, they would need to be eunuchs, because in the ancient world you thought that, hey, if they weren't distracted by the thing that distracts all men, then they would be better officers. So just keep that in mind. That's kind of who Potiphar is at this point. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. Then the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field, so he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him he had no concern about anything but the food that he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept anything back from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as he spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. All right, so just a couple of things before we move on to resolving this story for a bit. So Joseph is clearly he is a slave now. How does the Bible describe his state at the beginning of the chapter? What's the most important thing about his state right now, would you say?
What do you mean, state?
Like, it describes... All right. Yeah, it's hard to phrase this question. It describes him as God is with him. Okay? So he's a slave, but God is with him. So what does it mean that God is with him, do you think? Okay, favor how?
Okay. So, kind of like the Spirit fell upon him, like the Spirit was upon.
Okay, maybe, yeah.
Perhaps that's later down in the Bible.
Yeah, that hasn't happened yet so much so, but that's an interesting point. I like that. What does it mean that God is with him?
Everything he touched prospered.
Okay, yes. So we've got a little bit of Isaac going on. Remember, the people of Canaan were afraid of Isaac because everything he touched seemed to turn to gold. However, what happens to Joseph at the end of this story? Prison. So did God leave him? No.
His best soldier's in prison.
Yes, he is the worst general ever. Okay, so here's a point that I want to make. In this chapter, it's really, really interesting. It starts with, "Now the Lord was with Joseph," and actually ends with, "And the Lord showed steadfast love to Joseph." Does that mean that everything was blue skies and rainbows and honky-dory for Joseph? No. The Lord can still be with you, and you can still be thrown in prison for a crime you didn't commit. The Lord can still be with you, and you are still a slave in a foreign household. Just because things might not be going super rad for you does not mean God has left you. And actually, we see in the story of Joseph that God is still with him, even though bad things are happening to him. So I want to make that absolutely clear, is that sometimes bad things happen to you, and that's not because God has left you or God is punishing you. And we'll actually see perhaps some purposes to why this is happening to Joseph. Remember, Joseph goes down to 3 pits. 1 is a literal pit. 2 is here in Potiphar's house. It's not a coincidence that the Bible describes Joseph as going down to Egypt. Geographically, it's not really going like downhill or anything, but that's how you describe going down into a pit, is going down. So, we should be looking for one of our character flaws of Joseph to be transformed in this story. Remember, whenever he goes to Potiphar's house, what's one character flaw that we found with his coat? He didn't like to work, or didn't have to work. What do we know almost certainly happened to him in Potiphar's house? He had to work. So already we see a stripping of one of his character flaws, being a spoiled brat. And we see that coming off. This second pit we're going to see is a little bit interesting. So, usually when we look at this story from a Western lens or a Bible class lens, especially I've heard a lot of youth ministers use this story as a way to teach about temptation. Usually that's the moral of this story, is that what does Joseph do in the face of temptation? Yeah, he flees. He can't even be in the same room as temptation. And that's a fine lesson. I am making fun of it. But it's a fine lesson when you hear it. You'll probably hear it a couple more times in your lifetime. That Joseph flees from temptation. And that's a fine thing to say about this story. However, sometimes I think that kind of puts Joseph on this like superhuman moral robot stage. And that's not very realistic. It's hard to learn from Joseph whenever you put him on this like, oh, he's perfect kind of thing. So I really want to look at some of Joseph's responses and see what's actually going on in his head. So I want to ask you a question. Why does he refuse to sleep with Potiphar's wife? What are the reasons that he gives?
He's got everything. He's really successful.
Okay, what? Did you have something? Oh, nothing. Never mind. Okay. Okay, yes. So, Nathan says, I've got a lot of stuff, and no one is greater than I in this house. The only thing that has been kept from me is you. How could I possibly ruin my life by doing this? It's kind of like the husband who says, oh, I would never have an affair because then she'd get half my money. That's not love. That's greed. You might be doing something moral, but it's for the wrong reasons. Now, in Joseph's defense, he does pay lip service at the end to this tirade, but he first starts with, I have all this stuff. Why would I give that up just for you? And also, the God thing. He kind of tacks that on right at the end. We're going to see God move up in priority, but so far that's kind of the character flaw that we need to hone in on right now, is he is incredibly self-centered. He's me. Even his moral choice here is primarily motivated, in my opinion, by a self-preservation instinct. I've already worked my way up so far here. I'm not going to screw it up now. Okay?
Well, when you analyze that response that he gives,
Yeah.
think about how Potiphar's a eunuch, it kind of makes you feel almost, honestly, bad for Potiphar's wife just a little bit, because she literally has a slave tell her that she's not good enough for him.
Right, yeah, and also, for me, I think we do see a lack of tact, once again, by Joseph, and that's kind of got to sting a little bit for Potiphar's wife, that a slave won't even go for it. However, in the Hebrew, we kind of miss this, and it's too bad. I didn't know this until it was pointed out to me in my research, but in this Hebrew, whenever it says the word, whenever it's translated, he refused, there is actually a really weird Hebrew punctuation mark on there. It's called a shalat shaleh. It is rare. It is a zigzagging note that indicates a moment of intense internal struggle. It suggests that Joseph's choice was not easy. So a lot of times we read this story and think, wow, Joseph is just the Iron Man of temptation. There is no sin that could take him down. When in fact, the Hebrew wants to convey, he kind of had to think about it. This was not just a gut natural reaction that says, no, stay away from me, harlot, and move on. He had to think, which humanizes him a lot more. I think it's good to look at these people as who they were, people. And Joseph was legitimately tempted by this scenario.
Well, because she kept wearing him down. I mean, it's not like she just did this one time.
Yes, yeah.
Said day after day, and then he would not listen.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
And I also worry about this woman's self-perception. Like, my goodness, women have some decency, have some self-confidence. Anyway, verse 11. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and he had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to him, see, he has brought a Hebrew in to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. Then he laid up his garment by her until his master came home, and she told him the same story, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife had spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made succeed. Okay, so reading chapter 39 now, finally, and comparing it with chapter 38, what are some parallels you see? Yeah, Dex?
Yet another deception with a cloak.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah. So first off, Joseph needs to figure out how to keep his clothes on, because those seem to get him into trouble. Okay. What are some other parallels? What? Nah, okay. You stay there. Be comfortable. Okay. What else? Why would these stories be smack dab side by side?
They both went down at the very beginning.
Okay, so both went down, meaning they're both in a place of transformation.
Well, she had to take the garment, whereas Judah gave the garment.
Okay, Judah gives the garment up, but both of them are outed by their garments. Okay?
One goes to prison for it, the other one just flipsies.
Which is the one that goes to prison? The one who didn't do it. Okay, so there's some really interesting parallels here. Both of these sons of Jacob are put to the test in a very similar manner. One passes the test and goes to prison. The other one says whoopsie doodles and goes on his merry way. Now, that might seem unfair, but keep in mind, what did Judah do? He owns his mistakes. One thing we never see from Joseph is him owning up to his own part to play in his story. For instance, no, he did not deserve to be thrown in a pit and sold as a slave. He did not deserve that. However, there were also actions taken by him that probably kindled the hatred in his brothers' hearts, or at least stoked it. We never see Joseph really own up to that. So, Joseph needs time to cook. He's not quite done yet. He's not quite ready for what God has in store for him. And so we see him, even though he, in our eyes, passes the test, still gets thrown in prison. Yeah.
So, it's kind of like going back over that, when you talk about the whole teaching they do. Look at how quickly Joseph ran away, but then you introduce the Hebrew
Yeah.
concept where he actually had to think about it. But when you add that contextually to this, it makes you, at least it made me think about how, why does it specifically mention that he went and there were no other guys with him? And he had Potiphar's wife hitting on him for probably weeks at a time. And he knew nobody was there.
Yeah, kind of puts into perspective, so did he flee? It's like yeah, you never want to put the blame on the victim, but there was definitely like, what were you doing there that time of night kind of vibes? Yeah, so yeah, I agree. There's a lot of questions about Joseph's conduct. And once again, doesn't really take any responsibility for anything that's happened. So now we're in chapter 40. All right? Joseph is in prison, and he meets two guys. Now, I want to, as we read this, I want you to start thinking about, okay, what is a character flaw that Joseph had? And do we see any transformation within this pit? I love the way it talks about the jail in prison because it references that it's a literal pit several times. So we are once again in a pit of transformation. I want us to try and think, okay, what are some of Joseph's character flaws and what stands out to us that might be shedding away to create a new person? Verse 1, sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody, and at one night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody of his master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches, and as soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is my interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly when you were a cupbearer. Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh so he can get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here I have also done nothing that they should put me into this pit." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, "I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating out of it, the basket on my head." And Joseph answered and said, "This is my interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all of his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot about him." Okay, what character traits do we see on display here from Joseph? Maybe some good, maybe some bad.
Well, originally when he had his first visions, or although we'll call them delusions, maybe, God is nowhere involved in them whatsoever. But this time he says, "Oh, tell it to me," because God is the interpreter.
Okay, yes. So for the very first time, we see God mentioned in his skills, okay? There was one question in Early Bird. How did he know he could interpret dreams? How did he know he could interpret dreams? Because I've already done it before, and those ones were good for me, so I'm really good at it. So we do see all dreams belong to God, all interpretations belong to God, but then what does he say? But tell it to me. Okay?
You said he was good at it, but they hadn't come through.
Yeah, so he may not know. Yeah, he may say, yeah, he may be like, maybe I'm really bad at it, but I'll give it a shot. One thing that we do need to notice about Joseph here, and this is actually going to come into play in a good way, but sometimes, up until now, it's kind of been in a bad way. He has some of the most raw, unearned confidence of any Bible character. He is incredibly confident in his own abilities. He never questions whether he will be able to do something. Sometimes that's great. It's kind of caught up with him a little bit up until now, but we're going to see it come into play as kind of a good thing later on. What else is kind of on display here? What makes him take notice of these two guys? Their eyes are downcast. And then what does he say? What's wrong? I think that's huge growth for our main man, Joe. I think the 17-year-old Joseph would have said, those guys look sad, but I don't care, and walked along. But now we have a little bit of transformation, a little bit of maturity, a little bit of growth, I would say, that he noticed another human being and actually tried to help. All right? So he actually asks, what's wrong? And then interprets dreams. Okay? One thing to notice about the way he interprets dreams is that both cupbearer and baker, their heads are lifted up, and that has obviously two very different meanings in this context. A lot of Hebrew writers are going to say that Joseph was trying to kind of tell them that, like, our lives are all kind of at the whims of Pharaoh. That Pharaoh is kind of so fickle that at one point he can lift up your head in a good way, and the other time he can lift up your head from your body and decapitate you. So that's something just to keep in mind, kind of a fun play on words there. What is another character flaw that we kind of see pop out here in Joseph? Remember me, cupbearer. Okay? We actually had a debate in early bird class because some people did not think that as wrong. Some people thought he is just trying to get out of being falsely imprisoned. So, good on you, Joe. What's wrong with that? Yeah, so first off, he kind of talks out of both sides of his mouth. Says, all interpretations belong to God, but also remember me. Okay? Looking back on all of our patriarchs, does it ever work out well when one tries to engineer their own rescue? She's my sister. Engineering your own rescue. I am Esau. Engineering your own rescue. She's my sister again. Engineering your own rescue. Always, whenever guys try to take it into their own hands, they don't trust that God knows what he's doing, things don't work out well. And we see Joseph being very Abraham-y, Isaac-y, and Jacob-y here by trying to engineer his own rescue. Does that work? No. Obviously does not. In fact, you will read in the right next verse, how long does Joseph stay in jail after that? 2 whole years. All of your translations should say something like 2 whole years or 2 full years or something like that. It really wants you to know 2 full years he spent back in jail. What does that tell us about God's plan for Joseph?
Joseph should have never asked to remember me.
Okay, so first off, that's kind of a clue, is like, okay, you know, God's all-knowing, so whatever, take this as a personification of a character trait, but it told God, you're not ready. You're still not ready for what I have planned for you, because you are still trying to engineer your own rescue. I have gotten you out of jam after jam after jam, and you're still not trusting me. So, because you were so blatant about it, you still need time. You still need time to grow. You still need time to mature. You still need time to trust. And God deems that as 2 years in jail. Does it ever say God left Joseph? No. In fact, it tells us again, God is with Joseph. A lot of us are going to look at this story and say, that's a really weird time for God to be with Joseph. In fact, it is the first time that we have a character get this cool word, Hebrew word called chesed, which is the steadfast love language. The closest interpretation is our version of agape love. But it's better than that, in my opinion. I think chesed is better than agape love, but we don't have time to go into that. But in any case, this is the first time a character gets that chesed, steadfast love from God, and it's whenever he's in jail. So in your deepest moments, interestingly enough, that might be when God is with you the most, is in your pits and in your prisons.
So do you think Joseph knew the plan?
100% not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm struggling a little
Yeah.
bit, because we don't know the plan. If you fast forward to today, you start thinking, well, at what point am I trying to circumvent God, or at what point am I just trying to,
Yeah.
give God something to bless?
Right, yeah, give God something. Yeah, take that first step. Yep, use my words. Yep, thank you. Yeah.
So, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, you could be coming down a little hard on Joe, because he didn't know God's plan like some of the other ones did.
Yes,
Abraham
yeah.
knew.
Yeah, sure.
Joe
Well,
didn't.
kind of. Yeah, so here's why I come down hard on Joe. How many times is God mentioned in that chapter? Once. How many times is God mentioned in the previous chapter? Once. I'm going to go ahead and say that Joe wasn't really consulting the plan. I don't think Joe not only didn't know the plan, I don't think he cared about the plan. I think he wanted his own plan. I think that's the problem. Whenever we're talking about like going on our journey and giving God something to bless, we're talking about putting God's will at the forefront of those plans. I would argue that Joseph doesn't, and here's why I would argue that Joseph doesn't, is we're actually going to see it come. I want us to analyze the response that he has with the cupbearer and the baker, and then Pharaoh, and see what the difference is, okay? We don't have time to read all of chapter 41, so I want the Cliff Notes version. Pharaoh has 2 dreams. Describe them to me. What are the 2 dreams that Pharaoh has?
7 cows.
Okay, 7 fatties and what? 7 skinny. Where do they come out of? The Nile. Okay, yes, yeah. So that's got some implications. The Nile was God to the Egyptians. So that's going to have some, and that's why it's like the first plague is turning the Nile to blood. Anyway, we can't get into that now. Stop getting me off track, Tony. Okay, so 7 fatties, 7 skinny cows. What happens? Okay, yeah, the skinny ones eat the big ones, and then what do they look like? Still skinny. Actually, we're calling them skinny. The text actually uses ugly, and I really find that funny because Pharaoh even makes the opinion of like, I have never seen such ugly cows in all of Egypt is what I dreamed. And I just love that little detail. It's so stupid. Okay, what's the second dream? Yep, corn, ears of corn. That's yes, yeah. So same thing. 7 pretty ears of corn, 7 ugly corn. The scorched ones overwhelm the good ones. Yeah.
I know it's not corn, but it's not corn. Corn is the new word for crop.
Okay, what is it then? What does your translation say?
It wouldn't be corn.
Okay, yeah, probably not. Yeah, yeah.
It's not ears of something, but it's not corn.
Right, yeah, okay. Ears of
Sorry, I just had to be.
yeah, no, you just want to look smart and you do, Declan. I just kidding. You should always speak up, Declan. It's yes, yeah. Corn is it is in just like North America, right? That's a corn?
Naturally, yeah.
Naturally.
It wouldn't make it up.
Okay, yes, yeah. So Egyptians did not have popcorn. Everyone feels sad for them. Okay, so ears of some plant. What grain? Okay, yeah, grain. The ever popular grain. Okay, so then what happens? Who tries to interpret? Not, yeah, I mean, so the magicians and the wise men try. I'm really confused about that part in the story because I imagine a lot of times the magicians and the wise men were just guessing. I don't know what about this dream. They were like, I don't even want to touch that. So they say, can't even think about it. So then the cupbearer, oh yeah, remember that guy? He has an epiphany. He says, oh yeah, that guy that I was supposed to bring up out of jail that's been for 2 years, he can do it because he did it for me. So now I want to start in verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. Okay, what's significant about that? Coming before Pharaoh is big, but what does he have to do before he gets out of the pit? Shaves and changes. We are talking about clothes again. Okay? And what's super weird about how these stories seem to be obsessed with clothes is what were we obsessed with in Genesis 1 and 2 and 3? Nudity. Okay, so we've moved on. We've progressed in society. We were obsessed with nudity. Now we like clothes. So we're obsessed with clothes here. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Verse 16, Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Then he describes his dream again. In verse 25, it says, then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream are 1. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will become 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow it, for it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dreams means that this thing is fixed by God, and God will bring about it shortly. Now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning... this is fun. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, and set him all over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land, and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be reserved for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants, and Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. Skipping to verse 42 real quickly. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. All right, so taking this step by step here. So, what is Joseph's response when Pharaoh says, I hear you can interpret dreams? Only God can through me. Okay? Very, very different response than what we have in the jail. And that's why I kind of made that point. Is I think after 2 years, Joseph has had time to reflect on who he is and who's in control, and has decided he doesn't have a lot of control. It must be God. And so as we see a changed man of, I hear you can interpret dreams. It's like, I can't do anything, but God sure can. Completely changed. What's melted off of him? Pride. His arrogance. We finally see him kind of come out as this beautiful butterfly, ready to fulfill one of the promises that God gives Abraham, which is to bless all nations. This is the start of that. Joseph starts a global blessing program through this famine. What is interesting about this story is that not only does Joseph interpret the dreams, but he immediately goes into a solution. All right? This is where Joseph's raw overconfidence really pays off, because he says, I know exactly what you should do. And they buy it. I don't know how confident Joseph seemed, but he must have seemed pretty confident, because Pharaoh says, excellent, you're my man. What is cool about this is that we know something about Joseph was that he wasn't a hard laborer, but we also know that he probably wasn't getting no training at all. So if you're not a hard laborer, what kind of training might you be getting? Intellectual, like, for instance, if you were going to be the Bahor, the heir, what do you need to learn how to do? Finances? Run a household? Maintain structure? Why is this kind of ironic? Is that these traits are the thing that's going to save literally the world at this point. These traits. When 2-3 stories ago, these traits were seen as undesirable, and in fact, it was man's man Esau that was going to save the world with his manliness. Instead, it's Jacob who is in the tent, probably learning what? How to run a house, finances, structure, organization. And I think Jacob passed that on to Joseph. And I think Joseph was so successful in everything that he did because he had that knowledge. Every household he was in needed structure, organization, and finances. Boom. Potiphar. The jail. Cool, right? What does Joseph not know that we know about his past? You can say, this is fun. Yeah. Well, okay, you forgot. Okay. What story comes right after he's sold? He's sold, and then what do the brothers go and do?
Oh, tell Jacob that he's gonna.
Yeah, does he have that information? You are Papa's favorite little boy, and you've just been sold into slavery. What are you expecting happens next? Dad's coming to get me. At some point, Dad's coming to get me. He doesn't know that Dad thinks he's dead. Days, months, years pass. And Joseph has, we see, kind of given up hope that Dad's coming to get him. And he finds actually a new father figure whenever another man gives him one set of clothes and then another set. Pharaoh. Pharaoh clothes him when he comes out of the pit and then gives Pharaoh's version of the Technicolor Dreamcoat with the gold chain, the signet ring, and the whatever. What's also interesting is that there's 3 elements to those clothing and there's 3 elements to Judah's clothing, but the only thing that's missing from Joseph's is that Judah got a staff. I wonder why a staff might be important in Egypt. Anyway, something to chew on for later. However, the only thing I want us to leave us with is that Joseph has started a new life in Egypt. He has a wife now, and he has 2 sons. What are their names? Anyone remember? What, Declan? You're mouthing one of them.
I'm trying to think, I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Okay, just say them.
Is it Manasseh and Ephraim?
You're exactly right. Manasseh, and I say Ephraim, but Ephraim is fine too. Manasseh and Ephraim, both of these names mean, I just want to get the exact wording here and then I'll let you go. Manasseh means, God has made me forget all my toil. And Ephraim means, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So, what does that convey about Joseph? He's different, for sure. He has moved on. He is done being a Hebrew, and he has embraced Egyptian life. He's saying, I am so done with my family, I'm forgetting that life and moving on to this one. However, if anyone has experienced family dysfunction or family turmoil, you know that it probably doesn't matter how far you move on from it, but it finds you. Something for next time. We'll close out in a prayer. Father, we love you, and we thank you again for this time that we get to study your word a little bit more closely, that we can learn more about your servants, and we can know how to become transformed people for you. God, we want to be reminded through the story of Joseph that sometimes we are just not ready for what you have planned. And God, I ask that you give us the patience and the wisdom and discernment to be able to wait on you, to know that whenever it's time for us to be ready for what you have planned, that we can be